Okay, Western Civ 1, just continuing with our lecture on the early Middle Ages. Just to remind you, in the year 800, you had the Frankish kingdom, Charlemagne's kingdom, dominating much of Western Europe, except for Spain, where the Muslims were dominant. These are, by the way, are the major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in 800. Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria. There were a couple of smaller ones as well, but those are the big three. Then you had, of course, the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, I did talk about Eastern Europe, but at this period, you'll see Slavs, and you'll see Sorbs, and Czechs, and Serbs. These are Slavic people. These people speak a language of the Slavic language family. So remember the great language families of Europe, the Romance languages descended from Latin, the Celtic languages like modern-day Irish and Scots and Welsh, the Germanic languages like modern-day German, the Scandinavian countries, Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, English, Dutch. But there's also the Slavic languages, Russian, Polish, Czech, Serbian, Croatian. And they come in with these Slavs. The Slavic peoples came in after the chaos that the Germanic invasions had caused. And they were largely being driven west out of lands in Far Eastern Europe by, again, the same kind of wild horsemen from the steppes, the Huns, the Mongols, pressuring them, making them flee. The Slavs came into Eastern Europe and Central Europe in the period of when the Germans were coming into the Western Empire. So by 800, they had set themselves up in a belt, the modern-day countries of Serbia, Croatia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Russia. These are the Slavic lands of Europe today. Well, that's 800. Now, to give you an idea how the Middle Ages progresses, just as a general overview, this is Europe, Western Europe at least, and Central Europe, around the year 1150. You'll notice the Frankish Empire is gone. At Charlemagne's death, at the death of his son, his empire was divided up. And there was the eastern part of the empire, which would eventually morph into what here is called the Holy Roman Empire. Look, it stretches down to near Rome and Italy, into Eastern Europe. Most of Central Europe in 1150 was part of the Holy Roman Empire. We're going to talk a lot more about them. This was a very important medieval entity which didn't formally disappear until the early 1800s. The heart of what's now Germany was the Holy Roman Empire. Now you'll notice it's called the Roman Empire because they wanted to claim some kind of descent. I think that might be my car horn going off. Let me see if somehow that happened. Yeah, for some reason my car horn went off. The panic button must have just pushed in my pocket while I was lecturing. I have no idea. How strange. But in any event, the modern day state of Germany is part of this, but not Rome itself. Now, the popes did crown the Holy Roman Emperors. So that was their connection to Rome. And they wanted to claim a kind of guardianship over civilization like the old Roman Empire held. So they maintained this sort of fiction of Romanness. And since the leader, the emperor, was crowned by the Pope, they called themselves holy, as if they were defenders of Christianity. But a lot of times these emperors of the Holy Roman Empire were just hardball politicians and warriors. They were no saints, trust me. So The Holy was a very strange thing to call this empire, the Holy Roman Empire. And then there's the question of what is an empire? Well, an empire is one body that rules over many nations. And yeah, there are Germans in this empire, there are Italians in this empire, there are Slavs in this empire, but the emperors were actually fairly weak. The regions had an awful lot of power. The emperor's control over the Holy Roman Empire was nothing like the ancient Roman emperor's control over the empire. In periods of peace and stability, the Roman emperors were absolute rulers of the whole empire, never so with the Holy Roman emperors. They always had underlings, people who were technically under them, who were often very, very powerful, and they couldn't make them do anything. So that one wag later would say the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But it was a political entity that lasted for hundreds of years and lent a kind of stability to Central Europe. Now, as I said, Charlemagne's son died and split his empire in threes. This portion, the eastern portion, would become the core of the Holy Roman Empire. The western portion over here would become the core of France. And this middle portion, the Burgundians and the men who would become the kings of France, they tussled over it. So those three divisions, it's going to take a long time for France to really settle down into one true united nation, but it'll get there eventually. Meanwhile, in 1150, England is a completely united country. They had gained control over Wales as well. They fought wars with the Scots, but they could not gain control of a united Scotland at this point in history. Look down here, you'll see the Muslims in 1150 were still in southern Spain, but now you have a raft of Christian kingdoms: Portugal, Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, that will be the heart of what becomes Christian Spain. They will slowly wage a war of reconquest against the Muslims, in Spanish called Reconquista. And eventually the King of Aragon and the Queen of Castile will marry, and they will become kings and Queen Ferdinand and Isabella of the United Spain in the very late 1400s, and defeat the last Muslim state in Spain in 1492. So this, and you'll see by 1150, there is already a kingdom of Poland and a kingdom of Hungary. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire has actually grown a bit in Europe, but it's lost control of the territories it used to control in the West. So it is now an entirely Eastern state. But look here, these are Muslim Turks, the Seljuk Turks, who had been eating away at the Eastern Roman Empire. In 1453, they will finally succeed in capturing Constantinople. But it will take the invention of gunpowder and large artillery pieces to pull that off. But in the meantime, they slowly ate away at the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. Muslims controlled all of North Africa and most of the Middle East. Except, look here. See what that is right there? Oops, I just shift a little bit. Look what this is right here on the Eastern Mediterranean. Crusader states. This is the era of the Crusades, brothers and sisters. We'll have to talk a lot about the Crusades. Hugely important, both for medieval history and our own history. Part of what caused those planes to crash into 9/11 was anger on the part of some Muslims about the Crusades that happened 900 years ago. America is a young country, and generally we don't have resentments that go back very far. I mean, some of our closest friends in the world are the Germans and the Japanese today, and we fought them in a major war just 75 years ago. But in other parts of the world, people still harbor resentments that are 1,000 years old and are still willing to kill over those. And the Crusades were part of the reason why Al-Qaeda was carrying on the way it was. Now, it also ties in with American support for the State of Israel, American policies in the Middle East in other ways. But a little bit of it at least, had to do with the Crusades of the 1000s and 1100s AD. In fact, Osama bin Laden's normal term for the armies of the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, his normal term for us were the Crusaders. So there you go. This is the last map. This is, I told you, by 1500, most scholars would say by 1500 we're moving into what's called early modernity, and the Middle Ages are over. This would also be the period known as the Renaissance, the rebirth, the great achievements of ancient Greek and Roman civilization. Many people then argued had been reborn in their time, in the late 1400s, the 1500s, Renaissance culture. But why do people think the Middle Ages are over by 1500? Well, look, you have modern day kingdoms like England, Scotland, France. Already Navarre, Castile and Aragon are going to be united by a marriage alliance. They're technically still two separate kingdoms, but we are just a few years away from a united Spain. Portugal's a separate kingdom. So by 1500, Italy's not yet there. The Holy Roman Empire is the core of what's Germany. It'll become Germany only a few hundred years later. Poland, Lithuania, Hungary. A lot of what Denmark, Norway, Sweden, all these Scandinavian countries by 1500 are recognizably the countries we know today. Just a little shifting of borders in a few cases. And a lot of the Western European nations have the boundaries in 1500 they do now, or very close. Nation states were born in the 1400s and 1500s in several of these countries, the same ones that are there today. So 1500 can be seen as shaping our modern world. Our modern world's already taking shape by 1500. Remember the movable printing press, movable type printing press, I should say, was perfected by Johannes Gutenberg in 1450. So by 1500s, there are printing presses all over Europe churning out inexpensive quality books. And that's going to have a revolutionary influence on learning and scholarship and schools to be able to have printed books instead of handwritten, very expensive books. Printed on wood paper as opposed to expensive sheepskin. Made learning so much more accessible to people. By 1500, that's there. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, right? And so by 1500, Europe is coming to terms with the fact there's a whole new world out there, North and South America, to be explored and to be exploited. Spain is already beginning to get rich by 1500 on what its explorers are bringing back from the New World. So, all those things. And of course, just after 1500, in the year 1517, Martin Luther will begin the Protestant Reformation. So this is setting the stage for a generation later, a religious upheaval that will divide Europe and Western civilization. So in ways that are very modern, Protestantism and Catholicism, as we know them today, are born just after this map. All right. So that's why 1500 is usually considered to be certainly the end of the Middle Ages. Now, that may seem like a long time ago, more than 500 years ago, but in scholarly terms, this is the early modern period. The early modern period. Modernity is the last 500 years to European scholars, although the world you and I know really was born more like 1776 and following. It's not just America, but that'll be a story for next year when you're hopefully all studying with me again. But in any event, I wanted to give you this quick overview of the Middle Ages before we start getting into details in the next several lectures on the Middle Ages. God bless.